In this tutorial, we're going to be painting the beautiful hollyhock. I absolutely love hollyhocks. I actually planted some in my garden in 2020. I started them from seeds, but they don't bloom until the second year. So I'm still waiting for them to bloom. I've had a hard time with the snails in them. So today we're gonna be painting them so I get to see their beauty with not actually growing them. So we're painting in a more loose style. I know some of my tutorials are a lot longer because I typically paint in lots of layers, but today we're gonna paint the hollyhocks in a loose style. So the first thing we're gonna do is kind of just sketch out what we're gonna draw. And hollyhocks are kind of this cone shape. The big flowers go all the way up this like long stem. So we're gonna just make 2 long stems here. If you followed my tutorials before, we always draw nice and light. And I tend to draw a little darker so you guys can see it. So we're just gonna do simple 2 of these today. And then just basic circles for where the hollyhocks would go. So we're gonna do one that's more bright pink and one that's more blush peachy tone. And this one's gonna be kind of like a side of a hollyhock. So kind of like a half circle or almost like a triangle on its edge, but curved. And this is just serving as a basic guideline for us. We don't have to get too crazy. And then hollyhocks have all kind of like the foxglove does, but these little buds that go all the way up. There's usually like a tiny little leaf attached to it. And like that. And these blooms are actually going to be so big that we can't really see between them. And then I'm just going to throw a leaf in here. The hollyhock leaves are kind of like a lily pad almost. They're really wide. You guys can see from the picture, but feel free to pull up hollyhocks on your own phone or wherever you're looking at your reference photo. And if you want to screenshot the one that I showed in the beginning, feel free to. All right, maybe just I'm gonna do like the back of one over here. And then those little buds. Kind of get a couple up here, do one more over here. All right. Oh, let's do a leaf. Hollyhocks also get something called rust, which I had never heard of before, and it's like a fungus, and it will destroy all your plants, or all of your hollyhocks. It's so sad. It's happening to mine right now. I'm just gonna erase where the stem was here. And any really dark lines, just go ahead and erase them because we don't want our lines to show through, especially in the lighter flower. Okay, let's mix up our paint. I have a size 6 brush. I'm gonna grab my water, and first thing we're gonna mix up is that peachy tone. And I have a little bit of a peach tone already here, but obviously I need to make a lot more of it. So I'm gonna I have yellow lemon deep here. I'm gonna add that, pretty good amount. And then I have opera rose. Gonna grab some of that. But any way that you can make peach, that totally works. It's usually some type of, oops, I'm so messy. Some type of pink and yellow. And then I like to throw in a little of this yellow orchard, I think it's called. Ochre? And if it's too bright, take its opposing color. So a little bit of green will make this just a little more muted. I'm gonna add a little more pink to it because I want it to have a little more pinkish tone, maybe a little Scarlet Lake. And we are going to, maybe a little bit more. Start painting. Now, you're gonna have a significant amount of water on your brush, but it should not be dripping off of your brush. But you do want a good amount so that you can do a light wash. Now the center of this is gonna be green, so I don't wanna paint the center. I'm gonna leave it dry, but I'm just pointing my brush and pulling down and making this kind of curved section. I'm just gonna do that where I point in the middle and kind of curve around for a petal. You can see my pencil lines are way too dark, but it's okay. Because I want to leave a section here for that green center area. Just like curving around here. Some of these petals are going to be a little lighter, some are going to be a little darker. You want to have a little variation. Again, I'm just pointing to the center, pressing down on my brush so it kind of fans out, and then making a little curve. And then just coming in and kind of filling in where that petal would be. So the hollyhocks are really round. They are made up of several petals, but they kind of all come together so they look like a big circle. Now, if we came in here and we put the green in right away, it's gonna bleed heavily into this, and I don't want it to bleed too heavily. So I'm gonna wait just a second, but I am going to grab a slightly darker pink and just kind of touch in here a little bit so there's some variation. And then maybe I want to do a little yellow over here. So I'm just going to pick up a little yellow and then lightly just tap it in. Okay. And then we're going to do this flower. Again, just really light. I'm gonna add a little more pink to this one. And this one, you're going to be able to see the center part. Oh my gosh, you guys, I'm a messy painter. If this ever happens, just get some clean off your brush and then get some clean water, and you can literally just move it around. And then I grab my paper towel and I just dot, dot, dot. Okay. Back to this. So like I was saying, it's on its side. So this is kind of like a little C curve, the petal, and then you can see the other ones fanned out, but we still want to leave that little area in the middle so that we can put the green and the yellow in later. So I'm just making a little C curve. I'm pointing my brush and then pressing down and pointing up, making this little cup, and then same thing, just pointing into the middle, curving around. Obviously, you're not going to be seeing a ton of this green part right here. I'm just tapping in some extra color where I want it. Maybe rinsing off my brush, drying it, and then pulling a highlight here. There we go. Just gonna do a dab of pink in here. And then I'm gonna actually put a little extra pink over here too. All right, moving on to our next hollyhock up here. Maybe adding a little more yellow to our mixture. And same technique. Imagining that there's a center area right here and we don't want to touch it. Just kind of curling around. And you can move your watercolor paper around if it's not taped down. Make sure it's taped down if you're not using a watercolor block. This really turned really yellow. That's okay. Okay. That, and then one last one, a little further up. And this one, we're not going to be able to see the center area. So we're just kind of doing pointing and curving all the way around. Maybe we have a petal that kind of comes out like that. We can put a little detail in that later. But not too much because we're trying to do loose style. Okay. So now it's not completely dry, but that's okay because we are going for that loose style, but we're gonna mix up a green, kind of a muted green that's light. And I'm gonna come in here and just make sure you don't have too much water so you can tap down on your paper towel if you need to. I'm just making these little lines with the tip of my brush. And it's okay if it bleeds a little because we are going for that little bit of a bleed. I'm gonna do that to this guy over here. And feel free to add a little more yellow or to mute it down with a little brown if you want to. Obviously these ones are gonna be a little more wet because we just painted them. Okay. So that's good. I am gonna take a smaller brush and just grab a yellow, kind of goldeny color. If you have lemon yellow deep and add a little of that yellow ochre or brown to it, it'll be a little more golden. And I'm just going to tap lightly in here. I'm just going to tap like you would see the yellow there. Beautiful. Now we gotta make, okay, so now we're going to come over here to these flowers and we are going to make them more pink. So grab your pink, whatever your pink is, and you can mix it right into that same color. It's totally fine. And maybe even add a little red. If it's looking way too bright, you know the trick. Red gets a little bit of green and it will kind of mellow it out a little bit. Or you can add black, but I like to use the opposite color. All right, and now we're coming in and doing that same thing, but we need to watch out for this right here. So this one is overlapping on this one, so just be sure to paint behind it. What I would do is just come in here and outline this pink. That way there's no question, you don't have to worry about running into it. And then I'm just making those lines towards the middle, so we leave the middle open. Getting a little water, moving it around. This is looking a little too red, so I'm gonna add a little more pink. Coming back. And we're really going for a loose style here, so we're not trying to do anything like super realistic. We're just having fun with it, and this is a method I like to use to create this in the middle. It's just pointing and then pressing down and kind of spinning it around. But if that feels weird on your hand, I mean, it does take some practice, but you could also just pick up your brush and do it like this. Okay. This is a little too. And I might just grab a little bit of just straight Scarlet Lake and tap it in here. Let's make it look cool. Right, and just heading on up. This one's still wet, so I'm not gonna touch this one. I'm gonna do this one because I know I said a loose style, but I don't want it to bleed into itself too much. Now this one you can really see the yellow part, so we're gonna make sure that we leave that nice and open. When the pandemic hit, I definitely found a new love of gardening. I tried to grow like fruits and vegetables and it did not work. And I have a whole new respect for farmers and anybody who grows their own fruits and vegetables because it is a lot of work. We're gonna make a little C curve here just to show that it's kind of tilted to the side. And there's not a lot of variation in this pink one. So I want to come in and I'm rinsing off my brush. I'm drying off my brush, not completely, but just there's no excess water on it. And I'm just gonna lift up some of this paint. I'm just pressing down and lifting it off. This is like one of the best techniques I learned when watercolor painting. But this is looking way too similar to me, so I am gonna add in just some of this hot pink. And if it's not bleeding enough for you, just grab a little water and dab, 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 and it'll move around. Okay, now we can go back to this guy. I might add a little more yellow. Oh, that was a lot of yellow. Oh man, I just made it like orange. Also, I'm not following my rule about water cups. So I always tell you guys one is for cool tones and one is for warm tones, but I accidentally used both of them, which happens quite often. Okay, so we're coming back over here and this one has kind of like a little curled leaf. Ooh, that color is not what I want at all. So a tip for you guys, if you have a little separate piece of watercolor paper, keep it off to the side and you can test your paints on that and it will really keep you from doing what I just did where I did not like the color, because the color can look different on your palette than it does on the actual paint or on the paper. So, okay, coming in here. A little curled. I'm kind of just making a squiggly line, honestly. I'm gonna grab more pink because it just really went left. And we have that big center area, so I'm just gonna point and then pull away from it and kind of spin it around. Gonna put more water on my brush so it looks a little lighter. And I'm kind of happy with how this is turning out. It's so like light and airy. I tend to paint realistic a lot, so this is kind of like new for me, or not new, but when I do this style, it just flows a lot easier. I think I'm just not so hard on myself. So come in and add just a little pop of color here and there. And then we have one more flower, and this one's actually going to be facing the opposite way. So you don't have to worry about having that center, but we are going to connect it here with the green. But I am pointing and pulling around. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just like a little circle back here. But don't make it all one color. Definitely add some variation to it. Just pop in some color there. Now we are going to go back in with our green, the same green. I'm gonna add a little more yellow to mine. And remember, you never want your brush dripping with paint. If it is, just lightly tap it on your towel. So I'm just making some little lines with the tip of my brush. Now this is mostly dry, so it's not gonna bleed a lot. Like these bled a lot. We're actually gonna come in here and make a little more detail. And then this one is a little wet still, so we're gonna get a little more bleed. Just light little hash marks. This one, just a little. And then this, we're just gonna paint where that stem goes. Okay, come back over here and just make a couple lines. You don't want all the greens to be exactly the same, so add a little darker green, maybe add a little brown. That's the key to having a painting that's interesting to look at. You want it to be generally the same shade green, but little nuances like, oh, this one's a lot lighter green than this one, or this green is a little more brown. It just makes it more interesting. And then this is looking too like perfect. So I'm gonna come in here just with a little water and dab it so that it just kind of blends a little bit more. So we don't want it to look too perfect. And then same thing, grabbing our smaller brush with the kind of golden tone and putting in that center, just almost like a circle in there. And I might come in here and just put a couple small lines, just to kind of give it a little definition. Nothing crazy, just to show that there are some petals here. Just kidding, I don't really like that. See, this is the beauty of watercolor, is if you don't like something, just grab some water and blend it in. Okay, now we're gonna make our stem, and we're going to grab that same green color, kind of a yellowy green, but we're going to, whoop, that's really yellow. Just add a little more green. We wanna darken it slightly. I don't know about you guys, but I have so many green paints. It's kind of out of control. I was organizing my paints the other day. I'm like, I don't think I need to have all these greens. I don't know why. I must just really like that color. So we're gonna paint our stem, and again, just tap your brush to your paper towel. It shouldn't have too much paint on it. You wanna be able to draw a straight line easily. And we're just drawing a line for the stem. Maybe come out here and make sure you're connecting all your flowers. And then I'm gonna rinse off my brush so it's just kind of a light wash, and I'm going to paint in these little buds. And you wanna keep them wet because we are gonna poke in some color here. We have these little leaves. There you go. And we also have these big old leaves down here. So I'm just like filling in these. There's no method. I'm just using a painting stroke, using a good amount of water because we do want to add some color in here to kind of get them to bleed. And come up here a little. And we're just gonna go around and paint all of our leaves. Let's start over here though, because this was a bad idea because now I'm gonna put my hand in it. So let's go up here. If you're left-handed, you might have to start in another area. So just do what's best for you. Like I was saying about the gardening, it's really a talent that people have. My sister is so good at it. I'm getting better with her help. If you guys have a flower or something that you'd like to paint, let me know in the comments. Or if you've ever been like, man, I wish I could learn how to paint that XYZ. The only thing I don't paint is I do not paint humans. Just not on my list. But anything else. Okay. Gonna paint this beauty over here. And the hollyhock leaves are really big, green, beautiful leaves. Okay, now we're gonna grab some variation in color, so maybe something a little darker. I'm actually gonna mute it with a little red. And I'm gonna grab a smaller brush. I have a size 2. And I'm just gonna tap in some color up here. Because like I always say, you want some variation or it's gonna be really boring. And then make sure there's variation inside your variation. So this one is a little more green, that one's a little darker. Sorry, this one's a little more brown. Those are a little darker. then maybe just this side, and then coming in for this leaf and making where a shadow would technically be if the light's coming in from this direction. And if your paint is not wet enough, it's not gonna move well. So you can help it along by just grabbing a little more water if you want to. And you will notice there's a little bit of bleeding going on here into the flower, but that's okay. We're painting in a looser style and we didn't let this completely dry first, so that's why we're getting a little bit of that. Just tap, tap, tap in that color. I might grab something actually even darker and just tap it in here. And I'm going to move this, otherwise I'm gonna put my hand in my paint. I don't wanna do that. So tapping this in. This is nice and wet, so it's really allowing me for the paint to explode. I thought this wasn't gonna be as long as of a tutorial, but we are at almost 30 minutes, so sorry guys. I mean, there's just really no quick way to do watercolor, I'm sorry. It takes time, but that's the beauty of it, is that you can sit here and kind of meditate and get into it and not stress, you know, just part of the process. Gonna grab that little darker tone. Just dot it in there. I mean, that's really dark. That might be too dark. So if you put in a color and you're just like, oh my God, that's way too dark, just do our little method where we rinse off our brush, we dry it off on a paper towel, and then we just come back in and kind of pick up the color. I'm just gonna blend it a little bit more because I think that it could look okay here. Just needs to be blended in. Okay. And this is a little bit of a harsh line right here, so I'm going to rinse my brush. I've flicked it off, so there's just a little bit of water. I'm just gonna scrub, kind of like a circular motion, and it moves the paint around so it looks better. All right, and now we're going to do our stem over here. Same thing, just tip of our brush. I'm gonna put my hand in the wet paint. Sky, and then it's the back of that one. I hope my hollyhocks bloom this year. I have a little too much, I had too much water on my brush, so sometimes I'll just kind of spread things around in other areas that need it if I have too much water, or you can always just tap down on your paper towel. And we're just really using just the tip of our brush here, because it's a smaller area. Okay. Now just grabbing my smaller brush and adding in a little variation of color here. That's not dark enough. There we go. So sometimes when there's a lot of water, you'll get this. And really what happened here was I just used too much water. So I needed to pull up some of that. But you'll get kind of a harsh line. Or if the water isn't evenly distributed, like something was wrong with this paper when I started, it had like dents in it. So I don't know what happened there. My dog probably tried to chew on it or something. Oop, that was an accident. I grabbed a green that was a little too bright, but I kind of like that. All right. I'm gonna wait for that to dry just a little. I wanna do a little more detail, but we can come back to our flowers, and you can leave it like this if you want it to be really kind of just loose, maybe more simple, but I wanna come in here and add a little more detail. And the way I'm gonna do that is just with little small lines coming in like this, because there's like all these small petal or veins in the petal, and I kind of want you to be able to see that a little bit. Mix up a color that's slightly different. And if it looks too dark, just blend it a little bit. My watch is freaking out. Okay, there we go. And feel free to kind of make the separation between the petals if you want to. And the back of this one is just where the petals kind of meet. There. And this guy, I am gonna put a little center part there. And I'll also attach it with green because it would be attached. I'm gonna grab just pretty dark green and just make a little line here. Oops. Well, there would be a shadow there, but I forgot our lighting's coming from this way. Your lighting can come from whatever place you want it to. I'm just adding in some little shadows here. But just make sure you're consistent. So I accidentally did it on the right side here, but technically there would be a shadow on this side because this flower would be blocking the light. So I saved it. Ooh. So that's pretty wet still, so we're getting a lot of bleed, but I kind of like that. And that's why watercolor is so fun. It's just experimentation. You're like, oh, that looks cool. Oh, you know, that didn't really work out. But sometimes you do something and it really pays off and it was just an experiment. And that is where the fun is at. Oh, I'm still gonna do a line over here. And then one last little shadow is our lovely, where these hollyhocks kind of fold over. I want to put a shadow here. Just like that little extra bit of detail. And something else that you can do once this dries is, which these are going to take a little while to dry, so I'm not going to do it. But you can put some veins in these leaves because they do have some really pronounced veins in them. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I love how it turned out, and I hope your guys' turned out great too. If you guys follow me on Instagram, please share your hollyhocks. I would love to see them. And if you're doing this as part of the 31-day flower challenge that we're doing in March 2022, congratulations on day 12, I think it is, or 13. You made it this far. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Have an awesome day.